Hello, how are you? Uh, Good afternoon. Now, I'll just move it over. I've nearly blinded myself looking at it. I'll move it over to where I normally have it. Sorry about that. I didn't think I'd be so, as the word says, so illuminated. Like the lights in Liverpool that used to have illumination, or the Christmas lights illuminated. Now, this is a statement about abortion from the Catholic bishops, um, and it was issued on Sunday, the 14th of May, which is good that they have at long last commented on it, because there was no debate when it was introduced, and people voted by 2-1 when they defeated it when Charlie Haughey was Taoiseach stroke Prime Minister. It was defeated by 2-1 when Gareth Fitzgerald and the Fine Gael, probably Labour crowd, tried to bring it in, and it got resounding no, but they plotted and planned, and so the Fine Gael stroke Labour crowd brought it in again, didn't they? Goodness sake. Yeah, and it was passed. Oh, dreadful. The media and all thought anyone getting money from this miserable government was obliged to support it, including a so-called Women's Council. They're not worth the paper they're written on, getting money from the government. Another mouthpiece, and quoting themselves as women. They're ashamed of themselves. This is a Catholic bishop's statement. 5 years since the abortion referendum. Following the referendum on abortion on May 2018, we said a new situation now exists in Ireland. It is essential for us as a church which cares passionately about the gift of life and wants to support both mothers and their unborn children to seek better ways of responding to this new and very challenging reality. The care that the church has for mothers and their babies is part of the mission of the whole church and must be lived out in our daily lives, private and professional. Today, we affirm our conviction that the innate dignity of every human life from conception to natural death is a value for the whole of society, rooted in reason as well as in faith. No matter what legislation is passed in my country, in any country, the fundamental right to life for all human beings at every stage of development still prevails. A review of what? In December 2021, the Government of Ireland, the mixed bag that we have, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, and the Greens, 12 of them, think that they can control the climate. This was not a review of the act in itself, but only a review of how it operates. The stated purpose was to establish whether the act was effective in what it did set out to do, namely ending the lives of unborn babies. Number of abortions over the 3 year period covered by the review, 2019 to 2021, almost 18,000 pregnancies were terminated in Ireland. During the same period, there was 175,000 live births in Ireland. For every 10 children born alive, one was aborted. The number of abortions in 2002 reached 8,500, an increase of 25%. By contrast, the number of abortions in England and Wales involving women living in Ireland have been declining steadily over the past 20 years. Why did so many women seek abortion? 98% of all abortions carried out to date under the Act took place in early pregnancy during the first 12 weeks. The Act does not require any reason to be given for an abortion in the first 12 weeks of pregnancy. The state does not ask why so many women sought abortion. As far as the review is concerned, it is the It is as if the women did not exist. Their circumstances are not discussed. The mechanics of Warren's abortion regime have been reviewed, but the human experience of loss and loneliness remains largely cloaked from public scrutiny, as if they didn't exist. Do you think we're all nutcases in this country? 10 pages of recommendation. The government's review includes 10 pages of recommendations for changes in the law or in the regulations pertaining to abortion, which are clearly aimed at making the act more effective in the taking of human life. We wish to refer specifically to 4 of these. The mandatory 3-day waiting period. The 2000 Act provides for abortion without any reason being given within the first 12 weeks of pregnancy. God, poor little innocents. Herod did the same thing, didn't he? In order to ensure that the woman has at least a short window of time to consider such a major decision, the Act requires that there must be a 3-day pause between the first medical consultation and the eventual completion of the abortion. The evidence is that over a quarter of women did not return to complete the abortion. The review now recommends that the 3-day pause will become purely advisory. This is what they're at, this crowd of yokes that seem to hate the Irish people. We strongly oppose the recommendation, which would weaken protection both for women and for babies. We call on the government. You think they'll listen? I think the thousands should march on that and demand a resignation. We strongly oppose it, which would weaken the protection for both women and babies. We call on the government instead to be proactive in proposing alternatives to abortion, which would both support women and protect babies. Neither do we accept the recommendation that the 12-week period during which early abortion can take place without any reason be given would be extended under certain circumstances. Extended, yeah. Yeah, probably up to birth. You couldn't trust this crowd in the government. They should be powdered out of it. Freedom of conscience for what they've done to the Irish people. Not just that, but other things. Freedom of conscience. Almost 90% of GPs do not participate in the provision of early abortion. 90%, thank God. It is not entirely clear how many of them have made this decision on the grounds of conscience. It is almost certainly much higher than the 26% suggested in the review. The agency identifies conscientious objections as a major factor in the refusal of hospital consultants to provide abortion. So they don't want to put pressure on them, do they? This crowd, this misruling. Throughout the review, termination of pregnancy inverted commas is described as healthcare. I've referred to this myself in my videos. This is an abuse of language. As we already pointed out, no connection with the health of the mother or the child is given as the reason for the vast majority of abortions in Ireland. Yet the review now recommends that the provision of abortion should feature as a mandatory requirement in jobs specifications and in contracts of employment. Failure to comply would result in termination of employment. This, quite frankly, is a shocking proposal. Shocking. Freedom of conscience is a fundamental human right and cannot simply be overridden in this way. See, they're interfering with human rights for those of us that don't support such evil. We totally reject that healthcare professionals who respect the right to life will be excluded from practicing maternity care or from obstetrics or gynecology generally. Legislation for the provision of inverted commas safe access zones. I commented on this. They want to murder the innocents without anybody having to say anything about it. They're trying to help those that are going down that road. The review recommends that legislation be introduced to provide for so-called inverted commas safe access zones to prevent any presence which would, inverted commas, would reasonably be regarded as having the effect of influencing a person's decision to have a termination of pregnancy or provide a service within the vicinity of any centre providing abortion. Limiting the right abortion and the killing of the innocents. Limiting the right to peaceful assembly is not the action of a state which purports to present itself as having liberal democratic values. We believe that those who conscientiously oppose abortion as a crime against humanity, that's what it is, must be free to express their concerns in a respectful and non-violent manner in the public space. They don't practice violence like this state practices. And now they're introducing hate speech. Nobody hates anybody except them. They're trying to stop anybody saying nothing about their evil. Decriminalisation of abortion. The Act, Section 23, regulates the circumstances in which the termination of pregnancy is not a criminal offence. In all other circumstances, abortion remains a crime. The review recommends that medical practitioners should be removed from the scope of Section 23. In other words, if doctors carry out abortions in contravention of the Act, they would be guilty of crime. We reject this recommendation on the grounds that nobody should be above the law when it comes to protecting human life. What can people of faith do? 5 years on from the referendum, it is time to consider what further we can do to support women and to restore the recognition of the right to life of unborn children. Here are a few possibilities. Be confident in the sharing your pro-life values. Valuing the right to life of every human being is a truly compassionate position. In our own homes and workplaces and among our friends, we need to have the confidence to speak truthfully and respectfully about the dignity of every human life. Be present to women in crisis pregnancies. Our casual comments or reaction can be encouraging and supportive, or negative and dismissive when a family member, friend or girlfriend tells us she is pregnant. Over the years, many mothers in crisis have felt supported, sometimes at the very last minute, by a sensitive offer of practical help to point a way out of their crisis, other than by ending the life of their unborn baby. Find out about pro-life support groups for women in crisis pregnancy, for parents of children with life-limiting conditions, and those who provide the spiritual support for people following abortion. Sign up for the Prayer for Life Novena. Join people across Ireland and the UK in the annual online Pray for Life Novena, which begins on the 23rd of May and concludes on the 31st of May, the Feast of the Visitation. Please register for the novena on www.prayerforlife.ie. We remain convinced that the Health Regulation of Terminacy of Pregnancy Act 2019 will in due course be repealed. We welcome the fact that a number of our Oireachtas members have stated that they do not wish to see a liberation of the current law. We will continue, however, to encourage a greater political acceptance that abortion is not the solution to a crisis pregnancy, except if the mother's life is in danger. The gospel of life will not be silenced. 5 years on, we will continue to advocate that both lives matter. We will continue to seek loving and supportive protection for every mother in distress and for every child in the womb, including those diagnosed with a disability or life-threatening limiting condition. We do so because we believe that all human life is sacred, and that Ireland and the rest of the world will one day come to accept this truth. Meanwhile, we continue to do our best to change the narrative through the dialogue and by testifying in season and out of season to the gospel of life. That's a marvellous statement by the bishops, and we applaud them. Long may to continue to pursue that sanctity of life and the savour of the and saving the innocent from being killed by their mothers with the assistance of the state.